Hi everybody, WindDrakeHEX here, doing a limited set review for set 6, Scars of War. I'm not going to be doing the rares or the legendaries because, well, basically they're rare and legendary, and more often than not when you get a rare, you're going to play it. There are some exceptions to that, but um, yeah, it's just the kind of an event. It doesn't happen that much, so the most instrumental part of any what was gonna make up most of your draft deck is gonna be commons and uncommons. So we're just gonna focus on those. I don't believe the whole set has been spoiled yet, but with release date, I don't know, in less than a week away, I think it's useful just to get a start reviewing and talking about these cards. So I'm just gonna go from top to bottom. Um, Using the spoiler list from Hex Primal. Hex Primal is a great site. I'm not affiliated with them in any way. Just using their website uh, graciously and humbly. Thanks, Hex Primal. Okay, so let's just go down the list. Tried to do a little preview of these cards, and I've been following along spoiler season 2. Um, so anyway, so card number one, first to review is Boisterous Ballard, which is a one-cost quick action at common. It says constrict or conscript an ardent troop um, with cost 2. The created card gets speed. So this card, I kind of like it personally. I think being able to have a troop, um, a random 2 drop for the cost of 1. I know you have to play it, so it's going to be total cost of 3, but um, that's of a particular faction is pretty cool. Uh, I don't really. It's not. You're gonna lose, resources in the exchange, but you're gonna gain a keyword, which could be useful, and occasionally you're gonna get like a legendary out of the deal. And for a 2 drop, there's not really a lot of bad 2 drops. For the most part, 2 drops are pretty vanilla, not all that exciting. I'm trying to think of every card in the that you could possibly get, and I don't have the ability to do that. But my experience with 2 drops since playing this game, I've pretty much played every set, is that most of them tend to be fairly priced, and with the speed clause, speed's a relatively strong keyword. Probably one of the weaker ones overall, but you know, it it's it could definitely on turn 3. Say you play this on turn 2 or on best turn 1. It's not going to be. I don't think you're going to feel cheated ever playing this card. The question is it worth a card? I don't really know. I I would go ahead and say no. I'd rather just play a 2 drop that I know what it does. But you are going to gain value out of this card enough to make it worth it. Uh, so, especially if you're in like a faction specific kind of synergy deck, then just knowing that you can bank on a particular faction is useful too. If I understand Constrict correctly, you need to have a the faction specific card already out in order to conscript. God, can I say that right? Because then it's gonna need to change its threshold to that conscripted card. So this card is common, so chances are it's not great. They did testing and thought it wasn't really broken or anything particularly wrong with it, so they just threw it in at common. If I was gonna have to give this card a grade, it's hard to be too hard on it just because it costs 1, but because it doesn't really do anything consistently or that useful that turn or when it's played, I can't really give it a high grade. And because there's variance on it, I can't even really give it a C grade. A 2-2 for 2 would probably be like a D plus. Like you're gonna play it because you need them, but it doesn't really do anything particularly special. Um, so I don't know. It can go high or it can go low on that, but the fact that you're gonna have to pay 3 total, and it takes up a slot in your deck, and you can't count on it, I'm gonna have to give this card a D minus. I'm definitely gonna play it because I want to be wrong, and it's kind of fun. And it doesn't really feel like that dramatic anyway. As a 23rd card, like it's not making or breaking your deck. It's not really gonna hurt you. It just doesn't like really synergize with a game plan or a line. Mainly because it's a 2 cost card for 3, and you have to play it. The fact that it's quick means you can play it on your opponent's turn and not really miss out on tempo if you had nothing else to do anyway. So I don't know. I guess, but I have to give it a D plus. Just quick grading scale basically is built around. Well, let's say a 3-3 for 3 would be a C, right? Um, a 2-2 for 2 would be like a D plus. I don't know if that helps as a reference point. The way I evaluate cards typically is using a concept called, well, base stats, right? So that's a base stat evaluation. But also I use another metric or model called quadrant theory. It was first introduced on a Magic the Gathering limited podcast called Limited Resources. They would evaluate cards based on 4 different parts of the game, like how good are they when you're ahead, how good are they when you're behind, how good are they at parity. I forget the 4th quadrant actually. That's so anyway. So I'm mainly going to primarily be referring to them on those 3 quadrants. And beginning of the game. So some cards obviously aren't going to be that great. Um, Late game, like some of your like 2 and 3 drops. But if they just help you develop exceptionally well, then that would be considered a great early game card. Okay, so basically, there's no way to evaluate this on the quadrant theory other than it's not particularly good at any part of the quadrant. So it would again lend me to give this card a low grade. So yeah, anyway, I'm going to go D minus on Boisterous Ballard. Okay, moving down, Karelian Sage has Diligence. Diligence means that you can exhaust a troop to reduce its cost. Oh no, I'm sorry, that's Mobilize. Okay. So Diligence means that you can, when this card untaps, it triggers an ability. And that ability is pretty much different for every Diligence card. So for instance, this gets +2 in flight until the start of your next turn. So, upkeep, this gets +2 attack and flight, and then it keeps that until your next upkeep phase, which is interesting. It's a cool mechanic. What Karelian Sage has going for it, in my opinion, is base stats. Now, some are going to think I'm crazy, but I absolutely love 3 toughness troops for 1 cost. There's a concept called defensive speed, which is essentially if you have a deck that wants to just lock your opponent down and then do things like fly in the air or create, incidental damage through like cards that do stuff like that, or set up big combos, or basically kind of control the game to get out some giant threats or bombs. It's all basically, those strategies are all built around either having answers to all your opponent's stuff, which isn't very common in Limited. So a way to do that in Limited is through defensive speed. Basically, you want cards that are going to outclass your opponent defensively at multiple stages during the development phase. So that's like turns 1 through 4, let's say, in an average game. A 3 defense troop for 1 definitely does that. Now, would that be worth a card on its own in a vacuum in multiple different decks? Absolutely not. But is it worth it here in this set? That remains to be seen. There are some kind of assault-based, scroungy type late game decks built around dreadlings that like games to go longer. They, Scrounge was a mechanic from last set that really paid off in stats or abilities or whatever. It gained its value through its setup cost of having troops in the crypt. Um, but that oftentimes they were bad played on curve. Like if you couldn't scrounge for them, or they weren't. They were definitely a bit overcosted. So a guy like this, the reason why I bring that up is because a guy like this is going to allow you to kind of shut down your opponent's attack, maintain your life total for a while to set up those combos, and defensive speed is important for that. So Karelian Sage does that okay. Now it kind of has a it kind of incentivizes you to attack because of its diligence clause, but um, I feel like this card, on the Quadrant theory, is going to be pretty good during the beginning stages of the game to a lot of Sapphire strategies. And it's as far as defensive speed, but it's also the times that it can attack, say you're on the play, or you setting this up to do two is worth taking one or something, say on turn two or whatever the scenario may be. Uh, that doing two damage is relevant. There are going to be maybe even some rare times that this guy is your only troop, and being able to attack and do two damage with evasion is fine. I don't think it's a good enough reason to play this card though. So for its diligent clause alone, I think you're really going to want it to be for its defensive speed. So, I mean, when you're ahead, you can't really count on it. When you're behind, you can't really count on it. I mean, unless it's during the early development stages and you're trying to shut down an aggro deck on turn three, this could be good. But honestly, it gets outclassed pretty quick too. I mean, it should. It's a one cost card, but yeah. So I don't know. I'm gonna have to give this card a D, maybe a D plus, just because there's going to be enough games, enough strategies that are going to want it. And when I give grades too, it has to do with these cards in a vacuum. People are inevitably going to say like, no, dude, in this archetype, this card's just insane. And I'll totally agree with you. The thing is, I'm trying to evaluate these cards at their base level. All cards have corner cases, and all cards are going to be better in certain archetypes than others. I'm thinking trying to make it as a baseline general evaluation as possible so that when you're not clearly in an archetype, you can have kind of a basis to think about these things and these cards. It's good. It's good to have like a kind of an independent card evaluation ability, especially if you're new, because it helps. Well, it helps with picks and everything. So anyway, so hopefully that was kind of helpful. Okay, the next card is Cloudbounder, which is a 5-cost 3/3 flight. Which before we talk about its other ability, is that good enough? Now, oftentimes, it is, which is kind of one of the shocking things. I kind of come from a Magic the Gathering background, so I was kind of trained to think that a 3/3 flyer for 5 wasn't really good enough. I know some sets it's definitely better than others, but I have found that in every set that Hex has ever printed, a 3/3 flyer for any cost, maybe not 10, but up to 5, even 6. I don't know if a card like that's been printed, but has its has its has its day. Now we're talking about a limited format. We're talking answers are limited, flyers are on lower lower frequency than ground troops, and evasion is quite strong. I mean, if you had like 5 Karelian Sages out and your opponent was like 9, you could chump block, and you had a Cloudbounder up, you could just chump or whatever down and win with your 3/3 flyer in 3 turns if your opponent had no answers. So, um, you can't. Obviously, you want to. If a 3/3 flyer for 4 would be a great deal. A 3/3 flyer for 5 Because it's not a good blocker. So your opponent can pay a 5 drop, and if you're behind, you're not. It's not necessarily going to win you a race. If your opponent can swing for 5 and you can swing only back for 3, you're behind. But now, if you can mobilize this at all, like you just need a troop and you need to exhaust it, I think it's really good. And because a 3/3 flyer for 3 is pushed, normally when any TCG designer creates something like that, they normally either make it rare or they attach a kind of a negative setup cost to it or something. Because that is a little too good. A 3/3 for 3 is good. A 3/3 with evasion is for 3 is nuts. So anyway, this card's gonna be very good in my opinion as far as commons go. I don't think the setup cost is really that much. Anytime you can reduce this cost, whether it's on turn 3 or turn 9, this card's most likely going to be relevant, especially because it has flight. So sometimes you're going to pay the mobilize and you're going to take, a couple damage because you lost a blocker or something on turn 3. But oftentimes you're going to play this guy and you're just going to, exhaust something kind of insignificant. And it's no big deal. And you got a super efficient troop out of the exchange. So I like this card a lot. And I highly suggest, during the release, just taking as many of these as you can. Just making sure you keep your curve relatively low. And really just enjoy beating with flying foxes through the air. Coyote, sorry. Yeah. Next card is Mindwrack Sorcerer, which is a necrotic warlock. Underworld Allegiance. Lethal. Yeah. Alright. I love lethal in Hex. It's really good. Troops tend to be powerful, I don't think anybody can ever accuse Hex of printing underpowered cards. Overpowered either, at least unlimited. I don't really never felt it's been Prince or Pauper or anything like that. But a Mindwrack Sorcerer is great. If it just said lethal 1/3 for 3, I would be fine because so many of your strategies, you just need that blood is trying to do. You just need to live, because they're more of the controlling aspect and they're more aggressive sides. I mean, imagine giving this guy rage. I mean, it's never. Your opponent's never going to feel good trading with this. The fact that it has 3 toughness means that your average 2-drop and some 3-drops aren't going to have really feel that great about ever blocking this, or they won't be able to block it at all. So it's normally going to trade with 4 and 5 drops, and because granted, I'm thinking of champion in particular, giving this rage and going off with it. But that's not even necessary because let's look at its diligence. So again, a diligence is when this untaps, it it triggers an ability. So each opposing champion discards a card. Okay, this is a 3-drop, right? So this has the potential to trigger a couple times if you play this on curve, especially with the lethal. So your opponent's going to be in a really tough spot. He's either going to have to trade down, trade value, as far as in the resource war. He's going to have to trade a 4 or a 5 resource card for a 3-drop. And the times that he doesn't, he's going to lose cards. Now, that's not necessarily card advantage, but it's card advantage. I think it's just pure card advantage. But so if this thing triggers, I mean, good night, man. You're gonna have a presence, a threatening presence, and you're gonna be down cards. So I think this card should be picked highly, and they're great in multiples. They're good at multiple stages of the game. They don't necessarily win you the game, but as far as a role player and as far as being an all-star and development early, parity. Great. Not really an end game card per se. Your opponent might not even have any cards. It's probably not really attacking through anything, but I mean, it's only doing 1 damage. Again, your opponent's not going to block it. I mean, it could finish a game, sure, slowly, but anyway, I really like this guy. I want to give him a B. Well, if I was just judging commons and uncommons, and not just like cards in general, I think this guy could easily be like a B, like 85, 86% B, because in the grand scale of like all the cards printed in this set, it'd be hard to kind of take up that seat, but it's better than a C plus. So I'm gonna give this guy a B minus. I think that feels sound. It's not a bomb, but definitely above average and definitely an influential card any game he's played. And yeah, I think that's a safe thing to say. Okay. So we got some rares. Underworld Oppression is a 5-cost single threshold blood basic action that says opposing troops get -1/-1 for each different underworld race among troops you control this turn. Okay, so this card, first glance, looks nuts. It's totally going to incentivize you to play, well, as many underworld troops as you can, as many races as you can. I don't know how many races there are off the top of my head. I want to say 8. That's just my guess. And then I want to, again, do some very loose math and say that on average, you're going to have 2 to 3 different races out on turn 5, or let's say what would be a relevant range? When would you want to cast this? Well, the earliest you could cast it is 5. The average game probably doesn't even go 8 turns. Maybe 8 turns, but somewhere between 5 and 10, but that's not even realistic. So let's say turn 5 and to turn 8 is. Let's just say you have 3 turns to play this guy. Okay, will there be enough underworld troops of different types to make this card good? No, I don't think so. Mainly because on turn 5, say you do have 2 or 3, if it hits a troop, one troop, and it's not the troop you have to deal with, it doesn't really do anything for you other than just you take a whole turn off and you pay. I gotta pause the recording for a second, or maybe I don't. Maybe the dog will stop barking. My baby's asleep. I gotta stop. Okay, so dog is now in. Okay, so this card's. I don't think it's going to be good enough, often enough. I think it's going to be something you try very hard to set up, and it's not going to deal with the card you need to deal with. Even in a 2-for-1 situation, which is clearly great, card advantage, potential blowout, there's going to be, even those games have times when your opponent just plays a bomb, or like an evasive card you can't answer with your board, and you're going to want your removal just to deal with a single card. Now, I will say that this card is exceptional against some decks, so out of the sideboard it's going to be an all-star, but in the main, I think we're all going to play it, don't get me wrong, but I think we're going to find that over time its setup cost is too high, The times that we 2-for-1, we're going to be giving ourselves high fives, or maybe even 3-for-1, or 4-for-1ing, clearly. But the times that we just lose with this card in our hand because it can't deal with, a 3/3 flyer for 5, and we just watch ourselves lose, we're going to be bummed, And because it's basic speed. I mean, your opponent can do things like kill one of our cards and one of our races in response, and then it goes and looks at troops on this chain, and it gets nerfed, and it does nothing. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff. I don't know. I think the promise of this card is very, very sweet. I think its actual day-to-day delivery is going to be a little disappointing. I think, I want to be wrong, but, people are going to play this card and it's going to look just bonkers nuts. And then it's other times we're not going to even see this card be played, and it's going to be sitting in someone's hand. And they're going to be, like, frustrated. So we'll see. But I give this card a C after saying all that, because it's going to be so good when it's good that it's going to, like, win you the game. Okay? But it's also going to be a dead card. So that's why I just have to give it a C. Alright, moving on. Wicked Web Spawn is a troop, veteran rogue. When you scrounge, for those of you who don't know, is it's a cost attached to a card, normally optional, that when you void something from your crypt through the action of called scrounging, you get an effect, an ability, a troop, keyword, something. So it's that's what it does. So this is a card that is a okay. So this is a when you scrounge, summon 2 Dreadlings. So that's great. Now this card's uncommon. It's uncommon for a really good reason. Probably a bunch of reasons that I can't think of, but the one that I can think of is that it's a 2-drop single threshold 2/2, which makes it playable. Just bam, you need 2 drops. And 2/2 is what you would expect to get from paying 2 resources. The fact that this has any keyword on it at all makes it great. Yeah, just think of any. I mean, Hex has printed some really good 2-drops at common and uncommon. Just think of any card. Think of a 2/2 with Swift Strike, or a 2/2 even with Vigilance. So that's not really a great example. 2/2 for flying would be great, or 2/2 with lethal. Something. Add any keyword to a 2-drop, and it becomes great. I used to call those bonus bears in Magic the Gathering, just because the classic 2-drop from like 100 million years ago was a bear, a grizzly bear. It was a bear, and it was getting a fish from the river, and rawr, it was a 2-drop with no stats. That's why they called it a bear, And if it had anything attached to it, it was a bonus bear. So this is what we call the bonus bear, if you're old. So yeah, I like this guy. He's obviously in the shard that cares about scrounging. I mean, the time you play this, are the 2 Dreadlings really going to be impactful? No. But what is impactful is that, I mean, the average scrounge cost is like 2, maybe 2.5 or something. But, scrounge, there's a lot of scrounge 2s. And being able to replace what you scrounge is going to help enable further scroungings. I mean, that's great. It's definitely going to be a card you're incredibly grateful to have if you have any scrounge. And if you have no scrounge, well, if you need a 2-drop, you got it. So with that being said, in a vacuum, clearly you need something that says scrounge. And a 2/2 for 2, by itself is probably a D+, almost C- in certain sets, but if they're like in low supply. But since it's going to be like give you some extra sauce when you really need some extra sauce to kind of just keep progressing your deck strategy, then yeah, it's going to be great. So I'll give this card a C+. I'll just give it a C. Yeah, C. I wish there was a different grading system. The American grading system is stupid. I give it a 77.5%. Just miss C+. Okay, but I'm going to be wrong, because this card's going to be really good, so I'll just say C+. Like it really matters. Like anybody's writing down my grades, Oh, WindDrake said C+, and So, but whatever. It's how I that's how I organize my thoughts. So leave me alone. Okay, Fargo Cap is a 2/1, 2-cost Shroomkin with Socketable Miner. I think it's that. Honestly, that's C+ for me already. The sockets kind of suck. We got really spoiled with some really sweet sockets. Uh, if it's like a 2/1 and it gives you a Valor, if you're like in Ruby Wild, that's cool. If you're in if you can socket it with Diamond, a 2/1 flyer for 2 when it attacks is really good. Being able to make Dreadlings if you have a Scrounge deck is really good. If you're playing Sapphire, being able to it being a 3/1 with Crush for 2 is going to be good in certain strategies. So, I mean, any socketable minor ability on any true drop has been really, really good. It kind of has diminishing returns kind of thing on your 5, 6, and 6 drops because the minor sockets are kind of underwhelming, but they're pure gravy in the early stages of the game and on 2 drops, and it really feels like you're getting value. So that's the joy of it, and yeah, I think it's a great card. C+. I'm going to be at common. I would love to play 4 of these in a deck. If every 2-drop slot was taken up by this guy, I'm happy. All right, moving on. Some really powerful cards. Strangle. This was an early spoiled card. It's made a lot of people happy. It's like the new Murder. Being able to play Murder and Limited is fun. Really, really fun. It feels so busted when you're on the other side, too. Like, why did they print a card? It's just so efficient. I mean, they killed my thing and played a thing. I am so far behind, All right. So this guy, double threshold. Okay, they had to put some setup cost on this card. Because what this card actually does is just kill most things. It definitely kills more than it should for its cost. Okay? Normally, like, to analog this to, like, another shard would be, like, do 2 damage for 2 resources to, like, target troop, If it said, like, troop or champion, then it's good in more phases of the game. That there's, like, this power creep thing and that avenue they tend to, steer away from. But this card is just super wacky good. It has to be uncommon. I mean, a common... If this card was common, everybody would just be pushing for blood because they'd just be able to answer all your stuff, and then just win with a big troop. It just control. There would be like a control meta unlimited. Anyway, the fact that it's quick action just makes this card even more bonkers. So this is like it's not bomb removal if there is such a thing. They're normally considered kind of separately, but this is B+, A- material. Yeah, it's gonna be in limited. This has to be one of the most influential removal printed at common and uncommon. I mean, as you'll see, Diamond got a pretty good one too. But this is great. Love this card. First pick it. If you have 2 or 3 in your deck, you're gonna win a lot of games just on the back of being able to answer their stuff. It does say this turn, so you can't like play the nerf their 6-drop and that kind of game, like effectively taking it out of the game. So it's gonna lose some value as the game goes late, but awesome card. Talon Keeper Watcher. We finally got the buddy of the other Talon Keeper. I don't know if it was Talon Keeper something. But anyway, the Talon Keepers buff other Talon Keepers. This guy's defensive, which kind of makes him sad. Not that that's not a good sideboard card, But let's see what else he does. Maybe he'll lose defensive. I think he will. I have a feeling. While you control a Talon Keeper Hunter or another Talon Keeper Watcher. Oh, so there's a Hunter and the Watcher. This may attack as though it didn't have a defensive. So, yeah, that's clearly not that great. No, but there's always this like tension with these cards because sometimes like playing when plan A fails, plan B fails, plan C fails, and you find yourself like searching for a strategy for your deck, you look at your picks and there's a Talon Keeper, and then there's another Talon Keeper, and then there's another Talon Keeper, and then you get a little excited. You get to 4 Talon Keepers, and you're like, I'm all in Talon Keepers. Let's do this, man. And so what the other Talon Keeper does is like give I think a +1/+1 buff to other Talon Keepers. So if you have the other Talon Keeper, this is now a 4/3 that can attack for 2 costs. That's great. So it's like these cards become super efficient if they can combo with other cards. The thing is, the payoff is never really that high. I learned a long time ago, like my first year when I was playing Magic, that if your limited deck depends on um, a combo piece at all, like your win rate just goes down. I mean, there's like one deck. It was like this health gain combo deck where you could make angels for gaining health or something. It took like a bog and something else, and you were able to make 4/4 flyers eventually and just lock your opponent out of the game. But it took like two. It took like 2 pieces, but those 2 pieces normally you needed like a third piece to help you ensure that you got the other piece, and you always ended up needing another piece, and you're just so mad, and you're like, oh man, if I just drew that card, I totally would have just won. And that happens like 6 or 7 times, out of the 10 times you've played that deck, and you're like, all right. So if you're not, unless you're going all in Talon Keeper, don't get too excited about this card. I think out of the sideboard, a 3/2 flyer for 3 is fine. Just to say, listen, man, I don't have any answers to your flyers. I'm gonna throw this thing up there, and it's gonna trade. Hopefully, hopefully, then whatever. Like, that gives it a slight consideration bump, but I give it a D plus just because there's there's not even any more Talon Keepers in circulation. It's not like we like anyway. Yeah, I give it a D plus just because I like the idea. All right. Blood's Favor, basic action, 3 cost, single threshold, uncommon. Um, so quick note: there's a favor cycle, and we're gonna read them all. They're all right here. And the fun thing about these cycles is we all get to pick which one's our favorite, right? And then lament the other ones. So Blood's Favor, basic action. I read that. Okay. Choose one. Each opposing champion discards a card at random. Meh, not worth a card. Draw 2 cards and lose 2 health. That is worth a card, especially in Blood, because Blood tends to be the what does Blood tend to be? Well, it tends to be the more control-y type, answer your stuff and then win with something big. That's always been the dark side, the dark arts thematic, More control. It has to do with death and killing stuff and big dramatic actions, and just oppression, right? Um, so anyway, the reason I bring that up is that typically, you know, they have a more than average removal sitting in their deck or manipulative cards. So getting access to them, can help progress the game plan of controlling things. And ultimately there's normally some defensive cards or they're answering your stuff. The health isn't really as they can kind of play with their health totals a little bit. Because there's inevitability. It's like if they can make it to the late game. Now, granted, losing health is more significant to a control deck because if they don't make it to the late game, they're dead. So, anyway, it's a fair setup cost, but you know, getting 2 cards for 3 cost is good. That's about as good as you can print a card uh, without it being busted. So at uncommon, this can't get any better. And because it's whatever, just seems to be what's done with blood. There's a cost. So anyway, so that's fine. That's definitely worth a card. And then or void each opposing champion's crypt. Gain 1 health for each troop voided this way. Opposing champion's crypt. So again, that's not worth a card. But the thing is, here's what I love about these cards. So if any one clause or choice is worth 1 card, this is worth more than 1 card, right? Because there's going to be those other cases that one of those choices totally wins you the game. or is exactly what you needed. And there's no cost for including this in your deck because it's one of them you would play in your deck anyway. So this card's great. Um, it would say it's an average card, but then it has its clauses just totally make it pure gravy. So I'm gonna go ahead and give this card a C plus, just because it's one card isn't really like game winning, and drawing cards also isn't always good. I mean, drawing cards is always good, but playing cards that draw you cards isn't always good. Um, because you can't always afford to do so. Like if you're behind, you can't be drawing cards. If you're at parity, it's heavily dependent on the cards you draw. During the early stages of the game, you're going to take a developmental hit, meaning your opponent's going to gain back the tempo initiative if you even had it to begin with. If you don't have it, you can't afford to play this card anyway. So there's never really a great time to play this unless you're kind of at parity or you're already kind of controlling the board or whatever, right? But drawing cards is always good. But if you're brand new and you think that this is like, oh, two cards, I'm gaining two cards to my opponent, I would just simply point out that no, you're paying a card and three resources to be up one card in the card advantage game. Okay, it's just something to realize. And you're paying 2 health. Not always going to be relevant, but when it is, you're dead. So just throwing that out there. But C plus because of all its flexibility. Okay, Diamond's Favors, a 2-cost single threshold. Ooh, 2 cost, nice. Quick action. Okay, this is already beating Blood's Favor in the favor derby. Choose one. Each opposing champion sacrifices a constant. Not that great. There's a constant that's going to be heavily played. We'll see later, but it's actually in Diamond, so it's kind of some tension there. Or destroy a random opposing troop with cost 5. Okay, so if you guys remember Pride's Fall, it was defense 4. This kills defense 5. Huge difference. There's in every set, I would say. I'm going to go out and say that every set has way more 4 defensive things than 5 defensive things, okay? There's only so many things you can print with 5 defense and have a set be balanced. So, this is going to hit way fewer things, okay? So, I don't know if that's an auto include in a deck. I feel safe that my opponent's eventually going to play something with 4 defense. It's not always true, but most games, sure. 5? Ooh, that's a tough sell, man. It really is. But it is more. Or troops you control get 3 defense. Now, this is a card that I could see myself playing in a lot of different decks. Yeah. If this could help win combat ever, then it's worth it. Now, if I knew this was going to kill a card in a matchup, then it's worth it. And if my opponent ever had a constant I just had to deal with, then it's worth it. No single choice on here is really worth a card, in my opinion. So a lot of them are very deck and matchup specific. So that being said, I'm not totally sold on this card. Definitely, it's going to be pulled out of the sideboard a lot. Probably pick it, just because, until you really understand all the intricacies of a set, it's hard to really tell how good this card is. And honestly, these cards are just fun to have in your deck because they are so versatile. You're kind of like hoping for your opponent to hit one of these corner cases so you can like get them. So that being said, but this is I like Blood's Favor way more, so I'm gonna give this a C minus. Ruby's Favor. A lot of talk about this card in Constructed. So let's check it out. Choose one. Deal 3 damage to each opposing champion. Not worth a card. Just not. In hyper aggressive decks where you need like reach, you just need to do a few points of damage. I'll go ahead and say that this is better, but it's just not consistent enough. It really does nothing to the what's fundamentally happening in a game at like 98% of the game state. That is just not worth it. Each opposing champion sacrifices an artifact. Again, I know there's going to be more artifact type things with cards like Fang of Nolzan, the Socketable archetype, and stuff. So, it's possible that this card is an auto include. I haven't seen that yet. That remains to be seen, in other words, but not worth a card. Or exhausted troops you control get Swift Strike this turn. So, um, I think in your Ruby deck, you're always going to want that. The problem with, you know, offensive-minded combat tricks, that are pretty much only good in offense, like this one, is just that they're only good at, parity or when you're ahead. They don't, they're not good at defense. Now, Ruby is geared towards attacking and getting ahead, staying ahead, ending the game quickly, aggression, all that kind of stuff. So it fits, and it's going to be better than if it was printed in Sapphire or something. But, yeah, so the analog to these type of anthem kind of effects, I say anthem, which I mean it affects your board, not just one troop, multiple troops, is that, if it gave like +1 in Swift Strike, it would be very good on its own. But the fact that it doesn't means that you're not necessarily going to be able to swing team and do a bunch of damage or blow your opponent out when they go to block and don't have an answer. Again, it does enough interesting thematic things for its shard type, but it doesn't necessarily, any one of those things isn't quite worth a card for me yet, which is probably the point of these cards, I think I would go ahead and say that the blood one is a little push just because one of them is worth a card. Maybe not in R&D's mind. They're smarter than I am. But in my mind, it is. And so, like, this guy here doesn't really... I give it a C- just because of versatility, and I haven't really played it yet. I'm probably undervaluing these. But, again, I'm trying to give, like, a baseline evaluation, so... as in a vacuum as I can, so that not to mislead anybody, because all these cards, go up and down based on their environment, of course. Okay, Sapphire's favor, 2 cost, quick action. It's quick action too. Sorry, Ruby's favor, quick action, great. That helps it out a lot. Okay, Sapphire's favor, quick action. Choose one, gain 2 charges, stun each opposing troop with 1 attack or less. Yeah, really? Is that ever going to be good? Maybe. We'll see. But really? Ugh. That's just not... That's just not good. Gain 2 charges? Yeah. Okay. So it gave us, like, kind of 2 uninfluential effects. Most games. Being able to play your champion ability early is good in some matchups, but champions have always kind of been tethered to a very manageable kind of place. If any champion is too good, it just totally makes the game unfun, and one-sided and stale and all that. So, anyway. Or interrupt all basic actions. So it's like, I don't know. This is like if somebody casts a basic action to set up a combo that also just happens to be a basic 2 basic action combo. I wonder if they're considering if casting a troop considers. No, it wouldn't be a basic action because it's not an action. So in some very rare case, this is going to 2-for-1 your opponent, including a card that targets basic actions. It's not worth a card. So I don't know. I don't think this card's good. Anywhere. I don't know. Hopefully I'm wrong. I do I do predict a scenario, say 10 years from now, where there's some combo deck that goes basic action, and it just says I win the game, and Sapphire's favor is going to be the perfect answer to that. And those guys are going to be like, I hope I don't play Sapphire because they have Sapphire's favor, and that card just totally negates my strategy. And yar. Don't play this card. Yeah, just don't play it. Wild Favor, 3 cost, single threshold, basic action, choose one, summon 4 Dreadlings. Is it good enough? No. Is it good enough in a deck that just has to trigger Assault or Scrounge? Yeah, that's a lot of Dreadlings. That should give you what you need. And gain 7 health. So that helps actually because, you're you're gonna play this card on turn 3 or 4 and your opponent's gonna swing back with something. If you can kind of fog them for that turn incidentally, it's not in the long game. It's gonna help. Or create 2 Valor and put them into your hand. I like that. I like this one. This is my second favorite. Valor is good. It's not quite worth a card, but it doesn't it always feel like slightly worth more than half a card? I mean, it's not a 1/1 token, right? You have a choice. You can put the 1/1 on something. Oftentimes, that 1 Valor is enough to turn a parity into your head. You're now swinging for damage when your opponent can't, It's really good. Valor is only balanced by other Valor cards. Or Valor Hate, which is not a ton, actually. I don't think there's any. Yeah, I don't think there's any. Uh, so, yeah, it's great. I really like it. Is any of this really worth a card now? No. I wouldn't want to get 2 Valor for 3. If there was a card that said that, I wouldn't really include it in my deck. It's not really worth it. But it's also kind of like, it's this weird place where it's kind of like has tension between factions, which I know is something that Wild's okay with doing. They're kind of like in the lore, they're kind of in the middle. They're trying to stay out of it, but they can't. So sometimes they lend a hand, sometimes they don't. They're kind of on the fence. It's kind of like, that lukewarm kind of girlfriend, boyfriend, or whatever who's just kind of like leading you on. You're like, yeah, we can hang out and kind of mess around, but really, I don't want to. I'm going to pretend I don't know you when I see you at Target, that kind of thing. Don't judge me. So yeah, this card's it's fine. It's very middling, but it's better than these guys. Well, it's actually kind of tied with Ruby's Favor. Actually, Ruby's Favor is way more exciting, by the way. But I think in most games, Wild's Favor is going to be more impactful. No, I can't even say that. I don't know. These cards are so hard to judge. I'm just gonna give it a C because I'm confused. Okay, Fang of Nolzan, 5 costs, 3/3 artifact troop construct, Socketable Miner, deploy. Well, let's just say it right there, 3/3 for 5 that can have any socketed card. No, 4 would be kind of the cutoff for that. 5, we need more. So let's see what the more is. Deploy another target socketed troop you control gets +1/+1. So this is going to be the marquee card, in my opinion, or one of the essential cards to build the Socket Matters deck. Socket Matters is, a lot of cards in set 5 are going to get turned on. Like the O3 that reduces the cost of a socketable card, and there's enough socketable cards. Like I like what they did in that they gave lots of card sockets, and then they nerfed the sockets so that you could really showcase kind of a unique aspect of Hex without breaking anything. You don't want your socketable cards to be that much better than your non-socketable cards, but you want to feel like you're gaining more control over your deck building decisions, right? And now we're finally taking that into a potential archetype, and the cards like Fang of Nolzan incentivize you to play that archetype, right? And I like it. Give this card a C plus. By himself, D plus, but this card clearly pushes you into a thematic thing. So in a vacuum, I guess you'd have to give him a D or something like that. But I think this card is obviously pushed towards an archetype, and it's an archetype enabler, and it's going to be really good in that archetype. So I like it a lot, and it doesn't depend on this card being on the board. It's going to give everything that buff, and then if it dies, those other socketable cards, keep the buff. So he kind of does his job and goes home. That's great. Withering Gaze. Basic action. Look at target champion's hand. Is that worth a card? No, but very useful, especially in like equally skilled matchups, you know? Choose a revealed non-resource, non-troop card and put it into your deck. Its threshold becomes blood. No, no thanks. Not into it. Worth a card? No. Don't play this. Just don't. None of these are worth a card. It's not influential enough. It doesn't. The fact that it doesn't even hit troops, just actions and constants. Yeah. No. I don't think this is worth a card ever. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so. Moving on. Zentov's Hunger, 3 cost, quick action. As an additional cost to play this, sacrifice a troop. Gain 4 health, draw 2 cards. So if it just said gain 4 health, draw 2 cards for 3, this card would be broken. The fact that you have to sacrifice a troop means it's pretty much degenerated to your Scrounge Dreadling type builds. Yeah. It doesn't. It's not like if you have nothing on the board, you can play this. As far as I know, like the rules state, you have to have this as a. You have to sacrifice something to play it because it's part of the cost of the card. So, meh. So. Moving on. D plus. It's just not. We don't even know if this set is necessarily going to give you the time and speed to draw cards when you want them. Remember just how fast set 5 was. So yeah, this card's tough sell, man. Tough sell. And your Dreadling deck is going to be fine if you're in. I don't know if there's enough incidental Dreadling production in Blood to where like I know there wasn't in set 5. Like you had to kind of push for Dreadlings. You had decks where you're just like, please give me a Dreadling enabler, but also oftentimes you had decks where you just had just good cards and you didn't even care about scrounging that much. And so a card like this, like if the meta would, if you're in Blood, you just happen to be making Dreadlings incidentally, then I'd say this card goes way up in value. But the fact that you need Dreadlings really kind of polarizes this card, so I'm not like super into it. I'm gonna give it a D plus, and then I could see this becoming a C, maybe even a C plus card if like Blood is just bonkers. It totally has time and speed and tempo and ability to draw cards. I just in limited, man, it's just like tempo is so huge that drawing cards is not always that great of a thing. I have found. I mean, it's always a good thing, but it's not always strategically a good thing, if that makes sense. Like you just can't take too much of a tempo hit, you know. And the fact that set 5 is still around, which is an incredibly fast set. This set is looking much slower. It's going to be kind of balancing things out finally. Sorry, things felt pretty nuts there for a while. This guy, yeah, we'll see. I doubt it though. I'm gonna give it a D. Bum, 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 bum. Decree of Banishing. Bum, bum, bum. 2 costs. Constant. Single threshold. Deploy. Void target opposing troop. Bam. There you have it. Second best removal I have seen so far at common and uncommon. This card is incredible. First pick it. Play as many as you can. It's a reason to go into Diamond. If you can play 2 or 3 of these, you're probably going to win on the backs of that card. So when this leaves play, so there's more. When this leaves play, put each card voided by it into play. So, big deal? No, because I mean, if there's playable cards that have constant hate attached to it, you're gonna see this card kind of punishing you more games, but constant hate has never really been like a theme. It's always a game 2 sideboard strategy. Like there's just not enough great constants to really warrant main decking constant hate. So the fact that you could pretty much just read awesome removal on this card, and that's good enough, right? That's how I'm gonna read it, and I'm gonna play as many of these as I possibly can. Maybe even splash them. Yeah, probably splash them because that's so cheap, man. Deal with anything. 2? Wow, that's special. Okay. Consult the Talon. Uncommon, 7 cost. I would expect some stats under here, but I didn't get any, so yikes. This better be awesome. Draw 3 cards. No. Well, props R&D for printing a card like this because it's not clear how good or bad this card is. I'm kind of like trained to think cards like these are bad because draw 3 cards for 7 is bad. Um, well, I mean, if you think about it, around turn 7, you are going to be out of cards most games. So I guess you don't really care if all you do for a turn is just draw 3 cards. Alright, so it's not horrible on its own. I mean, it's like C minus, maybe D plus, D. Yeah, probably D, just because you don't really want to have 7 drops in your deck to begin with. Unless they like say I win the game. But this definitely says I have card advantage, which wins games. Does that make it awesome? No, but does it make it interesting? Yes. The fact that it says mobilize, mobilize, mobilize. Dreadling enabler. Exhaust, exhaust, exhaust. Play this for 1. Wombo combo. Draw 3 cards on turn 3. Powerful? Yes, very powerful. Will win you the game? Probably. Incentive to go dredgy? Not dredgy. Dreadling, like in Dreadling enabler type decks. Yeah, sure. I like this card. It's a, it smells a bit like a build around uncommon, but it has enough of a straightforward kind of ability and payoff and it's not horrible when you can't. Well, it's not unplayable. Well, it's unplayable. It's hard. I've never seen a card that played with a card that said draw 3 cards for 7, right? I've seen a card that said draw 3 cards for 5, and it was absolutely format warping. This is back in some Magic the Gathering core set, like 5-6 years ago or something. Opportunity. The card was called Opportunity, and my God, wasn't it an opportunity? Like that card just was bonkers, and it was quick. I don't even know what I haven't played Magic in like 4 years. It was like quick or something. I don't know. But you could play it, and you just kind of, if you're sitting on the other side of it, you're like, crap, man, I guess I just lose now. I don't know what you have, but the fact that card advantage is great. Try it sometime. It's really fun. I don't know. I don't think you have to mobilize 3 times. This is, I mean, I know you don't have to mobilize 3 times. This tells you that you could mobilize up to 3 times, which is nice. So that makes this card pretty flexible. Obviously, it's going to sit in your hand and do nothing, and I can't say with any degree of certainty if the speed of this format is going to necessarily allow you to draw cards whenever you want with cards like this, but we'll see. We'll see. Alright, moving on. Shoku's Garden. Deploy, summon 2 Dreadlings. When a Shroomkin you control dies, gain 1 health. It's going to be very predicated on how good Assault and Scrounge are. Well, Conscript and Mobilize too. You're probably... I can see a deck where most of your deck says Assault, Scrounge, or Mobilize. And so you're just going to need to play cards like this. You're going to need Dreadlings to set things up. And you're going to need them to be cheap. And you're probably going to want to gain some health. I really don't like cards like this. They just don't feel very impactful. And they're very dependent on what they're played with in short order to make them useful. So, that being said, I'm not, over the hills with this card, but certainly not. I think it's going to be necessary. And I think it was necessary to be printed. So, thank you, Shoku Garden. D-. Jorgen's Workshop. Constant, and it is a liar. At the start of your turn, summon a Dreadling for each different Underworld race among troops you control. Every time I've tried to evaluate this card, I've always been excited. I don't know if it's because it just I just imagine games where it's just slowly accumulating an army of 1/1s, and they're doing things with other cards, and the value is just leaking through all corners of my game board, and I'm just feeling like I'm just a mastermind of a slow trickling wave of glory or something, right? Like these dreadlings just happen to just trigger this, and I'm scrounging that, and I'm assaulting this, and I'm and I'm, mobilizing that, and it's not really costing me a card like Shoku's Garden, it's creating value, and I feel like I have card advantage even though I don't, and thank you, Jorgen, and B minus. I know it's a little too, I think that's a little too high for a card like this, but I think this card is going to be exactly the utility card you need for many different strategies. So with that being said, pick this card highly. Okay, moving on. Dream Guide. Dream Guide is a 2/3 for 3 double threshold troop, Kyoto Warlock, which says deploy, put target troop with cost 1 from your crypt into play. It gets flight. So, I haven't seen anything. Well, yeah, we can think of some set 5 cards you like to bring back, like the 01 Flyer that gives you a Valor. That giving you another Valor and coming back as already buffed and dealt with and killed, and then getting more buffed, and this bringing those back more is great. Uh, I can't think of any other 1-drops offhand other than that this card is clearly great with, but its base stats aren't good, and so if you don't have a 1-drop, it's pretty bad, but it's uncommon, and it's not going to be picked highly. So if you really want this card, you're probably going to get it. And, it's going to feel like it's not game breaking, but you're definitely going to feel like you got, some major value out of it. So I like that card. So I give it a C, just because there's enough stuff floating around at common to make it its value consistently realized, let's say. Ruthless Cutthroat is a 05 for 3. It says, when you sacrifice a troop, this gets attack +1. I don't know if this is good. And ever. Because I'm trying to think of a case where, like, I'm making a bunch of dreadlings and, putting them in this guy might not be a whole lot different than just letting them attack on their own. This may be like a combo piece. Some other cards I can't think about, but it's super corner case, and I can't really say that's good at all. Maybe you need a wall. Maybe you need a wall, and, just stop some early aggression from your opponent. If that's the reason why you're playing this card, that's like kind of a bad answer out of the sideboard, which makes this card like an F. So that's just what I'm gonna call it. I hate to give any card an F, so I was just say D minus. Moving on. Roidbot is a 1-cost 1/1 1-shot, 1-cost gain a threshold of your choice. So that's a really cool way to fix your resources. I really like that it's a troop. I really like that it's an artifact. I really like that it's a robot, but this is because I like robots. And I like that it's 1-shot, too. You can do it on your opponent's turn, be kind of sneaky. Yeah, I like this guy. Really good fixing. I love the art, too, because the expression on this card's face is pretty much exactly like how this card makes me feel. It's like, because at some point, in any set I've ever played, I'm like, man, can they just give us a decent fixer? This set would be so much better if I could just splash a card easier. Oh my gosh, this is so frustrating. And Roidbot comes in and gives you a big thumbs up and just says, I got you, bro. And yeah, this is a very intuitive card for me. I enjoy it. Thank you, R&D. Spring Renewal, basic action, put target non-action card from your crypt into your hand. Before I evaluate this card, I think I should probably split these videos into parts. Yeah, it's just what I'm going to do, because I'm getting exhausted, and there's a lot more cards to evaluate. So anyway, so yeah, this is going to be part one. I'll do a few more cards. Spring Renewal is a put target non-action card from your crypt into your hand. I don't know, man. I'm beginning to feel like the uncommons they printed in this set are a lot of kind of mediocre. I guess it makes it. I'd rather actually have the mediocre cards be an uncommon than common, because then that would really influence the feel of the set if a majority of the cards you're playing with weren't that impactful. But just getting a troop or a constant back, I don't know. Maybe I'm not smart enough to figure out how many times this card is good. I know at face value, it just doesn't really seem that exciting. Um, it's good in the instances where you bring back a bomb, it's going to be great. Or just bring back the biggest troop on the board. It's going to be great in those games that you can afford to, you know, bring it back and play it in the same turn. At parity, when you're kind of setting it up, it just gives your opponent time to respond, and it's just not as impactful as you like it to be. I don't know. I think this is going to be very deck specific. It's going to be probably a good sealed card, because limited bombs are more prevalent, and removal is less. So being able to put an exclamation mark on that discrepancy is gonna help quite a bit. Um, yeah, I don't know. These cards are also very much dependent on the speed of the format. So I think we're gonna go from ultra fast of set 5 to um, still over the speed limit. Let's say. We're going from 80. We're going from 95 miles an hour on the freeway to 75, I think, in this set. I mean, you're probably not going to get a ticket, but, there's a chance. So anyway, yeah, D+. Surging Wildfire is a troop. That's good. He's an elemental, which isn't supported in any kind of tribal way. He's also not Ardent or Underworld, so he's an outlier, right? He just lives for the forest. But anyway, this card is a 4-cost 1/4 with Rage 1 and Speed. If this card was any cheaper, I would be super stoked about it. The fact that it's 4, your opponent's probably going to be able to block it, to no effect, or it's going to be able to block it profitably. I think one of these in your deck, if you have a lot of tricks, could steal a game on your side. A lot of average games, your opponent will play a 3/4. This attacks into it. He blocks because he thinks it's free. You pump it, and then he doesn't have a 5-drop. This card's going to kind of win the game in those scenarios. That's a fairly average scenario. The scenarios where your opponent doesn't block it because he thinks you have a trick, it's going to gain value. That's pretty good. The times that you need to stabilize, this isn't going to stabilize on your average 5, turn 6, turns whatever. And when you're ahead, it just, it doesn't really matter. So, quadrant theory test, but this card definitely needs. It didn't pan out very good for me, so let's call it, I don't know, C-, just because it's a fun, exciting card that's going to do cool things every once in a while. I think a card like this is very skill testing, because there are going to be times you definitely want to turn it on. Its potential is to become the best card on the board, but it takes a lot of setup and a lot of intuiting what your opponent could or play and how they're going to block, and what the next couple turns are going to look like. It's because this card needs help to be better. It needs to successfully attack and live to get better. So anyway, complex kind of card. And double threshold makes it, the payoff for double threshold isn't really there for me at first glance. So again, I'm gonna give this card a D plus. Power and Pain, quick action, socketable miner, conscript a underworld troop, cost 4. The created card gets all the socketed powers of this. I wish the second I saw this line, I could like go super mind, give me access to all 4-cost underworld troops now, and I'd be able to say this card is good. I don't have that ability, and I'm too lazy to actually do that. So I'm going to say this card is fair. And yeah, the fact that it gets a socket power, pretty nice. Now if it creates a random card that already has a socket power, I wonder if they happen to just by chance be the same socket, will they like cancel each other out? I don't know. But I think what you create is going to be good enough for the setup and tempo loss of playing this card. So I actually like it a lot. I think Blood Miner card gems suck. Like some of them are okay. One of them is okay with a champion if you're ahead, but I just think they suck. So until this card, who knows? Maybe what do we get new gems next set? Are we just doing two chapters to a book or story or however they're calling it block? Anyway, I don't know. I'm gonna give this card a C though, just because I have faith in R&D and that this card will actually be impactful and good. And I want it to be good because I like random cards that don't randomize the game too heavily. It gives you the fun without the folly. All right, Callous Carver, troop, 4-cost, 1/5, double threshold, uncommon. Holy crap, this card needs. I'm already out the door on this guy. Let's see what he says. Diligence. This gets 4 attack and life drain. Ooh. Until the start of your next turn. So, on turn, say you have initiative and you attack this guy on turn 4, well, turn 5. How often is he going to be able to do diligence? I think due diligence. Okay, I think often. Yeah, I think a good percentage of the time. This is going to trigger once. That's kind of funny. A good number of games when you have tempo, this is going to trigger once. Okay. All right. Okay. Not as exciting, but when you do, it becomes a 4 or 5 life drain. Now, is that going to be able to gain you 4 health and potentially do 4 damage? Thus, an 8-point swing. Yes. I think you're going to be able to do that often enough. Once, if you're lucky. So often if you're lucky. So how do I actually feel about this card? I think this card is weird. Again, it's a lot like Surging Wildfire. You're going to spend a lot of mental bandwidth trying to make this card work. And when it does, it's not going to do a whole lot. So some secondary questions would be, well, how good is a 1/5 or 4? I haven't seen anything yet that really makes me think long game Blood is that great. Blood's got some pretty cool flyers in set 5. It's got some very powerful scroungy type cards, and scrounge takes time to set up, so the defensive speed of this guy is okay. He does nothing. I think the fact that it has 5 toughness and it's 4 cost, it is going to be able to, untap and gain into diligence trigger. Now, if it said it gets to keep this, you just got to get him through and he can keep it, which wouldn't really be out of the question. I mean, a 4/5 lifelinker for 4 would certainly be a great card. Not game breaking, but a great card. Now imagine if you had to set that up. That would create a lot of fun tension. Probably some busted games too. Probably ultimately unfun, but the fact that when it does get it doesn't get to keep it. You do all this hard work. I don't know. Doesn't sound that great to me. I give it a D plus. I don't think I've ever given this many D pluses ever in a row. Maybe it's coincidence. Alright, Chastise. Basic action. Target troop deals damage equal to its attack to itself. This would be one of those, okay, brain, go forth and show me a complete inventory of the power, the toughness ratio, give me an aggregate scale or something of this set and return back to me the results. I don't have that ability and I'm lazy. I know in the past when I've played with cards like this, it always was frustrating. You know, part of that is bias. You just remember, the times the cards are bad. You don't remember when it was like you totally killed a bomb for 2. Um, I'm gonna consider this card like 75% removal. I'm gonna kind of throw him in. I'm gonna kind of main deck him when I'm desperate, but definitely gonna be sideboarding him a lot after I've seen my opponent's deck. So yeah, I give it a card a C. It's good enough. C plus, C plus. Just because it's removal. Removal is. I know, like for those that have been drafting for a long time, like removal is good. It's like saying the sky is blue. But if you're brand new, and you're just getting into limited, removal is so freaking good. It's so like being able to deal with the best card in your opponent's deck, um, and his second best and his third best and whatever, just is essential to winning games. I mean, you have to have answers, and it's really oftentimes come down to who has better answers, right? Um, in my opinion, it is better to answer than to ask. So you can play lots of great things, and then your opponent answers all of them, and then what? You draw a shard, you have a constant, you have a you know uh, an artifact that fixes your shard. You're just drawing the rest of your deck at the wrong time. Your opponent's now beating you down with a 2/2, right? So anyway, it's better to answer than to ask. That's my deep thought for the moment. Butcher. Destroy target exhausted troop. This is going to be the last card that I analyze because I am exhausted. Not a whole lot of analysis needed for this 2-cost basic action removal because whenever I've played a card like this in any set, in any TCG, it's always been great. It's not premier removal, but it is often going to be stock removal that, yeah, the thing you wanted to kill swung and did a bunch of damage and now it hurts you. But guess what? You don't have to deal with it anymore. And you only had to pay 2. And this is you have 3 of these in your deck because, it's common and people aren't first picking them. And so, yeah, you got a nice stack of these, and you know that as long as you stay alive and you can answer your opponent's stuff. Sweet. Thanks, Butcher. And thank you guys. I'll see you in part 2.